And we are going to get started. So welcome students to the final fall session for Stuff They Didn't Tell You in School. We're really happy you could join us for the last session, negotiating salary, which is obviously a huge topic. And we have some great people here who are going to help you navigate this as you continue to search for jobs. So we have two presenters today. We have Chris Diaz, who's president of Diaz, Yorman and Associates. And then we have Kelly Sigmund, who's the vice president of customer experience for the U.S. Postal Service. I'm going to hand it off to Chris to introduce himself and let him talk a little bit more about what he does. And then as a last reminder, you must attend all 4 sessions in order to get your badge. So if you've attended all 4 sessions, we will be reaching out to you with your badge. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
All right. Well, thank you. So this is my brief opportunity to talk about one of my most favorite subjects myself. But anyway, Diaz, Yorman and Associates, we're a 20-member, we're a small business geotechnical engineering firm, and we really specialize in large public works infrastructure projects. Planes, trains, automobiles. We're in LAX. We're with Caltrans. We're with Metro. In both ports and rail. So that's really our focus and our work right now. We hire quite a lot of Cal Poly grads. We have active Cal Poly grads right now, and we get to watch them grow through the company. We tend to hire graduates right out of college and advance them through their careers, and it's a really neat thing to watch them do. To watch them grow. They start out as a staff engineer, and then before long they're doing more sophisticated calculations, and then they're managing projects. And you have on the bottom of this, my son Brian graduated from Cal Poly Pomona, and he's now up in Oregon, working as a city engineer in Beaverton, Oregon right now. So you can go anywhere you want with this engineering degree. And one final note, my observation, I'm always impressed with the number of industry leaders in civil engineering that I encounter in civil engineering here in Southern California. Graduates that are Cal Poly grads that are now major vice presidents of large civil engineering firms, or they have their own businesses, are their department heads and major agencies like LA County Metro or Caltrans. So the Broncos are everywhere, and they're doing great things after they leave school. So, Kelly.
Thank you, Chris. My name's Kelly Sigmund. I am the Vice President of Customer Experience for the U.S. Postal Service. You know, Chris talked about how the sky's the limit with an engineering degree. I graduated in 1989 as an industrial engineer, and I started working for the Postal Service in one of their industrial engineering training programs. If someone had told me in 1989 that I'd ever be working in marketing as a vice president of customer experience, I would have thought they were crazy. But as I found, as I grew in my career, that the engineering principles, no matter what type of engineer you are applicable so much further than just the discipline of engineering. And so the exciting thing about an engineering degree is that if you have a love for that specific discipline, you'll be able to blossom in that discipline. But if, as you grow, your interests change, the beauty of an engineering degree is that you'll be able to do really whatever your heart desires, and you will be able to take those concepts and use them no matter where you land. And so it's really an exciting career to have this background, because it's all about process. And that's really what engineers bring to the table. And it's always amazed me at how many people over the years I've met who have a variety of careers, and they all started in engineering. And again, it's about taking those processes that you learn in no matter what discipline you are within engineering and applying them to the work that you have at hand. And it really will help you be successful as you go forward. So, so that's a little bit about me. I've been with them for 32 years and I've never had the same job for more than 3.5 years. So it, just a lot of variety in being able to work for the Postal Service. So, but here today, Chris and I want to talk to you about negotiations. If we can move on to the next slide. So the question is, we talked in our the last 3 sessions about, how do you prepare your resume? Then we talked about that interview. And now you're at the point where you have that job and you've been offered that. And now you're beginning to look at salary negotiation. And this is a really important brief window. And I have to say, thinking back to any time I've changed my job, or that's especially when I got that first job offer, it's probably the most intimidating part. But we hope that Chris and I hope through this session, and we've got some help as well from our fellow with Mike Beckage on the phone, that what we want to do is give you some insight to be thinking about negotiations, because during that brief window that you have, this is your opportunity to really ask, and the sky's the limit, although you need to make sure that you're educated in what you ask for and that you've really prioritized that. Because the thing is this opportunity will not rise again. So it's just very important that you really do your homework and you really think through that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What's important about this time period, and I'm just going to read this verbatim because it's so important, is you are more powerful when you're responding to an offer, because it's the only time your employer may want you more than you want them. And so in other words, you really need, if you don't ask, it will be an automatic no. And unfortunately, it's very difficult later on. Once you're, working in that company, it's really difficult to go back and try to negotiate something different. Sometimes there's an opportunity to do that, but in my experience, and the experience of my friends that I've been close with over the years, I think we've all realized that it's at the beginning of that job that negotiation is so important. If we go to the next slide. So when you think about the salary negotiations, there's really 3 outcomes for you and your potential employer. The first one, and is the best one, is a win-win. And this is really achieved through cooperation from both sides. The other option is a win-lose. And the bad thing about a win-lose is one person feels like, it's a really positive outcome, but most likely the other one is not feeling as good in this. And this is most likely to be more of a voluntary solution. And then the lose-lose, which is both parties lose. An example, might be a budget cutting negotiation. So really what your goal is to find that win-win so that you feel like you've gotten something that you're going to be really satisfied with, as well as your employer feeling really good about the decision that they've made about hiring you. We go to the next slide. So here, in the next slide, what we're talking about, and I think I have a little bit of a lag here. Is it on the next slide? Okay, there we go. Okay, I apologize. My internet at home isn't working quite as well today. The best alternate to a negotiated agreement. And so this is something that I'd recommend that you do further research on it. But the definition is the ability to identify a negotiator's best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what you want to think about is, where is it that you stand in these negotiations? So if you have something that you bring to the table that is unique, that employer will really want, that means that you come with the best alternative and you have the highest BATNA. However, if you don't have a really strong BATNA, that's when you need to be cognizant of where do you fall when you're asking for that. So one scenario, maybe later on after you're working, you ask your boss for a 10% raise, and he says absolutely not. There's two possibilities. You could leave the job and look for another job, or you could stay in that same job. The outcome depends on who has the better BATNA. So in that scenario where you ask for the 10% raise, if you've had outstanding work and you're the only one that's able to do that work, the business that you're working for is in really good shape, you would probably have a stronger BATNA than if your work had not been superior. So you really need to think about your BATNA as you go into these negotiations. If we go to the next slide. So here is a good example of, who has the best BATNA. And the first scenario is around supply and demand. In a labor market that's really tight with a specialized skill like what you have, you'll find that if there are not a lot of applicants, it would increase your BATNA. It gives you more negotiating power. However, if you are, if it's a slow labor market and there's lots of graduates for that employer to select from, then that lowers your BATNA. So you need to be realistic as you go into that negotiation on doing your homework to understand what's going on in the marketplace and understand, where's your BATNA going to be based on the supply and demand in the marketplace. The next scenario is around talent. So if you have a very specialized skill that there isn't a lot of people that have that would bring up your BATNA because that employer really doesn't have quite as many choices. So you'll have the ability that you can ask. You might be able to negotiate more money, or maybe you might be able to negotiate more benefits because you bring something to the table that's not going to be easy for that employer to get. So when you're thinking about BATNA, it's important that you think about that. And Chris is going to go through some really great examples of that and how you do that research so that you can go into those negotiations and understand, where do I stand with my BATNA, and be realistic about what you can negotiate for as you go forward. And then if we go to the next slide. So, in summary, you really want to be thinking about that bargaining range. So whenever you go into that negotiation, you really need to have your target point of your ideal salary. And you need to do your homework when you're doing that. So when you graduate as an engineer, you've been living on a shoestring budget for a long time. But now you're going to be graduating. You need to make sure that you're thinking about all of your expenses now that you're graduated. In some case, some of you are going to have student loans. You have to be thinking about how much your rent is going to be based on where you might get a job. Southern California is expensive to live there. So you need to be thinking about how much am I going to need for rent? How much do I need for my loan payment? So you need to go in there and come up with what your ideal salary is. As a starting point. And then the other thing is to go in there with your reservation point. So what is that minimum salary that you need? And that's where you need to make sure that you do all the calculations to understand that. Keep in mind that managers are going to try and determine your BATNA. Even if they're not thinking about it, they're going to be thinking about supply and demand. They're going to be thinking about your talent. They're going to be thinking about how many people and how much how much did they think you were an excellent fit for that that organization. And that way they can go in and think about what that BATNA might be. And then and you need to make sure that you don't necessarily reveal that because it really is your, is your bargaining chip as you go forward. And then making sure that you're, exploring offers, to understand, when do you want to stop? And that's where, and Chris will go through that. There's different things other than just the money that you need to be thinking about when you're going into those negotiations, because there's lots of different ways that you can get compensation once you get out into the workforce. And it's important that you not forget about those things. Because those can really make a difference as you go forward. So with that, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you on the next slide.
All right.
Oh, thank you.
So you're in a really neat place now. You've gone through all the interviews, and now we're negotiating. You should have a offer letter that you're probably responding to. They've laid out what they're willing to offer you, and now you're considering it. And sometimes people get more than one offer letter at the same time when you throw these out. So yeah, you have to start with knowing what you want. That's really basic. Know exactly what your salary requirements are. Going back to what Kelly was saying about that reservation point. When I go into almost any negotiation, whether it's buying a car or anything, I always think to myself, what's my number? What's my number? And it could be a crazy number, but usually, if I want to sell something, I'll come up with a crazy number. If somebody offers me my crazy number, we're done. I'm gone. And conversely, I've gone the other way with a low number. What's the number I wish I could get this car or item for? And I walked in and I was floored. I thought I had such a crazy low number, and they already offered it, and I was done there too. So you're going to want to know what you want, and that goes into number two, about doing your homework. And I have a slide on the next slide. It'll be a little bit about that. The greatest tool is information. I will say. We're in a weird time. I don't know where supply and demand is right now. We hear about this labor shortage. We hear about this. We hear about that. But there's supposedly a lot of job openings out there, but there's also still some high unemployment numbers. So this is truly uncharted territory, what you're walking into. I will say you're walking into in a better place than I think last spring's grads walked into. So you're definitely, I believe, in a you're in a better place on the supply side of this equation. But anyway, and I do want you to think about what the current industry salaries are, and that'll be my next slide. And just be prepared to understand everything, because it's not just the hourly wage or the yearly salary, but it's the other items in there too. And so this goes back to knowing your company, knowing the company you're going to join. This company you're proposing to join, man, you're going to spend more time with them every day than any other group of humans on the planet. By the time you throw in commuting time and everything else and 8 hours a day, this group of people are the people you're going to be with a lot, even virtually, even if we're still working remote. So understand the company you're going to, do your homework on that. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So I I added this slide because last year I thought we told everybody to go do their homework and we didn't give an example. I have a theory about engineers, especially civil engineers, because I am a civil engineer. Civil engineers can do anything, absolutely anything, as long as we have an example problem in front of us. So this is a little bit of your example problem. I had I have one of my staff people. She's a drafts person. The drafting is kind of is being phased out hard and fast. So a few years ago, I told her, you know, you're kind of in a ceiling here. You've grown as far as you can as a draft person, but there's really nowhere for you to go. And I said, what do you want to do? And she surprised me. She said, I always wanted to be a geologist. I said, well, let's make you a geologist. And so for the last few years, she's been working for me and going to school. Next spring, she's going to be a graduate from Fullerton as a geologist. And so I gave her an assignment to go find out what is the salary you can expect as a staff geologist. I'm always benchmarking what we do. The managers are benchmarking the salaries. You should be trying to benchmark the salaries. The people you're negotiating with, they know what they've been paying their employees. They know where the industry trends. So they probably have an advantage of this, but you can still go out and find data. So I told her to go on out and find your position that you're going to have next spring with me. Let's see what the salary should be. And so that's why it's entry-level staff geologist. And I will say the very top first resource that I like, I was pleasantly surprised, Cal Poly Pomona, it is the Career Center. We went into the Career Center. I asked for access to the Career Center. On the first page, you go down to the highlighted job search and look over there. Look at that. After you go to that page, salary and negotiations. Pretty neat stuff. Somebody already thought about this. And then inside salary and negotiations, we were able to click around and mouse around and get on this first line of our table over here on the left, $31.25 an hour. They actually listed entry-level engineers, and they labeled it as entry-level engineers, and that included all engineers, and they put 65,000 per year. So you simply divide by 2,080, 52 weeks in a year, 40 hours in a week, 2,080, you get a corresponding hourly wage. And so we put that in the column. Something you have to be aware of when you're looking at these numbers on these websites is this a national number? Is it aggregated through the whole country? Do you have you know, the salaries from Savannah, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Boise, Idaho, and Oakland, California mixed into this number? You know, salaries a lot of times are regional, and they're also by discipline too. So ideally, you'll find salary information online that is to your discipline and your region, and maybe it's the region that the job offer is going to be at. I would expect the salaries to be a little bit lower in Boise, Idaho than Orange County, California. The same thing if you're looking to move out to some of the other places in the Midwest or the South. Don't be surprised if the salaries are a little bit lower, although that is changing. They're getting a little more normalized. So she came up with a list of about 10 sites that she found on her own. It didn't take her very long, and we kind of put down the top three. We put Cal Poly Career Center at the top, and when you're in the Cal Poly Career Center website, I think we were able to actually go into some of the back resources that Cal Poly came up with that number, that's 65,000 a year to start as an engineering grad, and it took us to the U.S. government Bureau of Labor Standards, I think is where it was. Great website. If you really want to get into the weeds on this, that is a great website. She also liked the salary.com, which is the next line on our little table. It came in, you know, between 24 and 34 an hour for her particular staff geologist position. Salarylist.com, it came in at $32 an hour. I have this bottom one down here. This is a proprietary benchmarking tool that I use. This is an industry. This is CalGeo Salary Survey. CalGeo has a student organization on campus. It's for a branch of civil engineering, geotechnical engineering. I was surprised that this actually came in this low. You notice that for the state, it has $27 an hour, but for the local zone that we are in, it was $23 an hour, which I thought was kind of low. So when you look at these numbers, you got to think regions, you got to think whether it's nationwide, you know, there's other little nuances to this. The final line down here, the actual $30 to $33 an hour, that is what I will be paying this year and next year, entry-level staff geologists or entry-level geotechnical engineers that choose to come to my firm. So this is also a good exercise for me to benchmark. Am I unreasonably low? Am I unreasonably high? Or am I like Goldilocks? Not too hot, not too cold, just right. So a lot of times you want to try and be in that sweet spot between high and low, and just kind of in, you know, kind of in that sweet spot. So this is just a little exercise we did for her, just to see, just to help her know what to expect. So this is what I mean by do your homework. I don't think she has a lot of hours into this, but it's out there. The information's out there. You just have to do a little bit of digging. Don't just go to one site, grab it and go. You need to look around. And there's another source of information that you can benchmark your profession to, depending on what you want to do. And that is on the public sector. When I say the public sector, I'm talking about the city engineers, the Caltrans engineers, all the agencies like Metro or the LAX, all these people in civil engineering, these big public works agencies, it's a law in California that information is public. You can find it. You can even look people up by name if you're so inclined, but you can definitely find the information. So for their classifications, and you probably want to look at the entry-level classifications, you can see what those agencies are starting at. And that'll also give you a benchmark. And you can also, if you want to, go look and see what the highest rated person is, and you get an idea of what the career growth you could expect over time. And of course, that's in today's dollars, and those will only go up in time. So this is what we mean by do your homework, and this is just a piece of it. Go to the next slide, please, Chelsea. So yes. So now we're going to so now you've got where you've got some answers in. You're now negotiating. You can always assume that the job offer is negotiable. And the second bullet under number 2, 1/3 of applicants report discomfort with negotiation. For some reason, that number feels low. I'll bet you 2/3 of the applicants report discomfort with negotiation. You know, it's sometimes it's not comfortable, especially you're coming out of school and you're not used to. This is hard. This is hard, but just go ahead and do it anyway. You want to be in that sweet spot, not grabbing too high, not accepting too low. We talk about on number 4, expanding the pie by asking for other things than just salary. There's other things to consider in the job offer, and our next slide will talk about that. you know, you can when you're talking to the person, you can talk about your passion for what you're doing, and that's always good. Um, you know when to walk away. You know, that's always seems a little extreme to me, but do be prepared to you know, say you know, let me consider that, and you might email back later on, I've considered, and thank you very much. But you know, throughout this whole thing, you're selling yourself through the negotiations. The idea of negotiating is not a it's not a bad thing. I when I reach somebody that's a kind of a tough negotiator, sometimes I admire them, because I think, man, I wish they were on my side negotiating for me on my project, and I consider that a plus. Next slide, please, Chelsea. Other things other than salary. We had to rearrange this slide a little bit. Look what we put on top. Flexible schedule, remote work. I think this is going to become the norm, and there will be more flexible schedules, more remote work. You know, when Kelly and I started, we were doing you would commute. You know, it was like the seven dwarves, hi ho, off to the, you know, off to work we go every morning, every afternoon. I think that is going away in some form. So there will be more flexible schedule. There will be more remote work. It used to be something you could ask for. I think it's going to be something that's going to be a given. The accelerated performance reviews, if you know, like it says, if you're confident, you know, that you can really prove yourself. Some of these things, cell phones, laptop, home office, a lot of that's getting bundled up into the remote work packages now, either as a stipend or an actual item given. At our company, we have standardized laptops that we give everybody. We give a stipend for the other things like your internet service and your cell phone. Tuition reimbursement. I like this one. This one, ask for this one. Say, hey, if I go from my bachelor's to my master's, it's really common to get your master's degree while you're working in engineering. Will you help me out? What's your policy for this? They'll have an answer. Memberships, yes, memberships. Ask them what their policy is on membership reimbursement. In my field, it's American Society of Civil Engineers. It's CalGeo, like I talked about. There's other ones. That this is a benefit to you and the firm you're joining. Your involvement in memberships post graduation is just a benefit all around. You just because you're leaving school doesn't mean your education stops. You're going to be taking these short courses and seminars and going on. Stock options, maybe that in my firm that's a little premature. We go more for stock options on more senior level people, but I don't know. The next two about relocation and moving, we have to address that. If you're here in Orange County and your first job site is in Sacramento, or let's go pick on Boise, Idaho again, it's on Boise. You know, it's going to cost you a few $1,000s to move, and hopefully they'll be willing to help you with that. I got the free parking. You might, some agencies, some companies, they'll help you out with the commuting cost if you choose to commute with public transportation, mass transit. If you're going to get a job in downtown LA, you can use the Metrolink system to get to your job. You know, that's not cheap. That's $250 a month. So maybe they'll help you with that. So that's what we mean by expanding the pie, is just some ideas. You might have some of your own personal preferences. And like we said in earlier slides, if you don't ask, you don't get. You just have to, No one's going to fault you for asking. The worst they'll do is say, no, we don't do that. Or they might say, oh, we'll consider that. Or they might surprise you, especially on the tuition reimbursement for your future job growth. There's even some companies will help you pay off student loans too. So that's out there too. So things to think about, things to ask about. Next slide, please. And I think it's for Kelly.
Okay, I unmuted myself. I always tell myself I wish I had a penny for every time I heard someone tell me to unmute myself for the last 18 months. I think I'd be a millionaire by now. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to prepare for scenarios. And for those of you that were able to listen in on the other sessions, there was another session 2 weeks ago that I was a part of with Mike Beckage. And the one thing, if you were there to hear, I'm very passionate about your elevator pitch and knowing the bottom line, being able to communicate those things that are most important for you. And that's the reason why I think it's so important to prepare for some scenarios for practice. So we're not going to do a breakout session here, but these are some great scenarios to think about. How do you want to respond when they get, when an employer talks to you? How do you want to approach those different scenarios? So one of the scenarios may be the employer agrees immediately to your counter offer. We're happy to have you as part of the team, which is a great scenario, right? You give them your counter offer and they take that. And that normally means that, that you did a good job, but make sure that you're ready for how do you give that counter offer. The next one is the employer lowballs the job offer and says, this is our final offer. I know Chris talked a little bit about the additional benefits or maybe expanding the pie. And I know that there was something in the chat about that is, someone, had mentioned that they're trying to negotiate a salary and they're being told, this is the base pay, there are no negotiations. Depending on who you are looking to work for, that may be the case, especially if you are going to work for some type of agency or for something related to, a government contracts. A lot of times there might not be as much flexibility, and that's where you need to be thinking about expanding the pie. So making sure that you're thinking about what are some of the additional benefits that you might be able to take advantage of. And the third one is employers makes a small concession saying, we're impressed with what you bring, how about? And that's when the employer's opening up an opportunity for you to expand the pie. So that's another, another option. And then the last one is the employer asks you to propose a reasonable offer. What will it take for you to join your team? And that's where all of this research that we just got done talking about is really important, so that you make sure that you're, that you're asking for that offer that, I'll just say, I don't think that happens all that often. So you need to be prepared for that. The other thing is, and I think it's come up in the chat a couple of times, is that money isn't everything. So if this is an organization that the amount of money that they're offering is aligns with something that you can live with, but the organizations, their values really align with who you are, you need to step back and really think about that position, because that's an important part. I put in the chat that your job is far more than just 8 hours a day. It's really easy when you're in school to think that, you know, I'm going to go and do this job for 8 hours a day, and then I have all this other time. But as a professional, it really ends up being a lot more than just 8 hours a day. It ends up being a really big part of your life. And so you want to make sure that you find that organization that really fits who you are, as well, and making sure that as you're doing these negotiations, thinking about what are those most, you know, those really important points, because money is not everything. And so if this company really aligns with it, it meets your, you know, the minimum that you're looking for, and you feel really good about it, then, you know, you may want to go ahead and take that position. But if you can't survive on that money, then, and you believe there's other options out there, then, I mean, I guess that might be the situation where you want to walk away and pursue other opportunities. And that's really scary when that happens. But, you know, that's something, you know, as an engineer, that's something that you can explore today. If we go to the next slide. So we're going to open up for questions, but the one thing I just wanted to say, you know, just to quickly summarize, is you just need to make sure that you're doing your homework, as Chris had indicated, making sure that you're using all the resources, making sure that you're thinking about everything that's important to you, and then also making sure that you practice that elevator pitch, or making sure that you really know how to communicate what you bring to the table. And that's a really big part of that as well. And it's not something that you really think necessarily first of in negotiations, but you need to make sure that you're always keeping in mind what benefit are you going to bring that company, so that you can keep going back to that and bringing that forward. So with that, what we'd like to do is open it up for any questions that anyone may have. Chelsea, are you going to help us with that?
Will do. So there's one in the chat box right now that says, if someone has proposed a job offer but wants to hold that offer to see what another company can offer, how can one do that without losing the initial offer?
So when we give job offers, we usually have a date that we would like a response by in our offer letter. And it's usually about 10 days out. So there is a little bit of time built in right there. So and if you want to, it just never hurts to be honest, and just tell you know, I would like to consider this for an additional week or two. Don't go out too far, but you can ask for a little bit of time after that. So the job offer you get really should be in writing, and it should have a response date on it. And if it doesn't, turn it around on them, and when you reply to it, say, hey, can I respond to this, and put the date that you want if they're silent on a response date.
If I can add to that,
Please.
Yeah. So when we're interviewing people and approaching an offer, we always ask if the applicant is actually pursuing other offers, and even, do you have any offers that you're currently considering? Because if this is somebody we're really interested in, we kind of know what their time frame is too. So it goes both ways. And as Mr. Diaz said, we want, you know, honest communication is really the key here.
Thank you. I know you all have done so well with answering some of these questions in the chat, so I'm trying to backtrack here a little bit. There's one I think that we didn't quite answer, which was, are interns expected to earn entry-level wages or lower?
I'll go on. I'll go on that. So we tend to when we ask for interns, and we will approach a school like Cal Poly Pomona for interns. We don't normally pay an entry-level fee wage for like a entry-level staff engineer. We do pay lower. We have a classification that we call the junior engineer. It is lower. I will say it, you know, it's quite a bit higher than minimum wage, but it's not the same as the entry level staff engineer. And one of my personal pet peeves in all of the business community is the unpaid internships. Don't do it. I don't get it. I think it's more in the business community, the financial companies and those sorts of folks. But I would not, if I was as an intern, I personally never offer an unpaid internship, and I would hope you wouldn't take an unpaid internship. That's my mini rant. I'll stop.
So going off of that, what about negotiating a relocation stipend for an internship?
So I think that is, I think that's appropriate to ask, especially if it's somewhere different. You just have to keep in mind, though, for that organization that you're applying for, think about their BATNA on whether they really need to pay for that. I know, though, in our organization, what we've done, because we do expect our interns to be in the Washington, D.C. area, which is going to be, we know is going to be expensive. We offer most of our internships during, this is pre-COVID, to be, during the summer months and during summer breaks. So what we've done is we've partnered with with universities in the area so that people can find a lower cost of living place to live. And we give them a list of places where they may be able to find temporary housing to find that. So we don't offer relocation, but we do assist our interns on how to find a location that they can live in during that time. I don't know if Chris and Mike have any other thoughts on that.
For our firm, I don't think we've ever considered an out-of-state intern. A lot of times the relocation cost I think of is more associated with a permanent move. Mm-hmm. Moving your stuff from here to there or there to here.
Yeah, there may be companies that do that, but I have to say I haven't heard of it, and it's usually local people that you want as interns. But I will say that one of the things that our company has done is, as opposed to a non-paid internship, we've actually hired a small number of people over the years in engineering and both electronics and computer science, who are near the end of their school stay and nearing graduation, and hired them part-time, with a decent salary, with an expectation that if it worked out, they would just stay on. So a lot of times in engineering, when we invest in training and you get used to a company, and it's kind of a win-win. It can be a win-win if you find an arrangement like that. And I know, being a Cal Poly grad and working part-time and full-time the whole way through my education at Cal Poly, I know that I became more valuable even as a part-time employee until the point where I graduated and then got a promotion. So that can be another way.
That's a great point, Mike. We have made offers to quite a lot of interns in the history of our company, but we'll bring them in as an intern, and then we like them, they like us, and it's a good fit, and we will offer them that staff engineering position when they graduate.
All right, so one other question that came up in the chat, and I know Kelly kind of touched on this a little bit, but I thought we could bring it up again because I feel like this is important. When you're already with the company and you're trying to move up internally, how would one discuss the negotiation of increasing their salary?
So, yeah, Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, we because of the nature of our business and working with so many public agencies, we limit everybody's salary increases to one time a year. It's in December. And we have other reasons to do that. It's more with billing and invoicing than anything else. So everybody gets everybody knows that salaries will increase at this time of the year. So there is a window to negotiate with us. I really think that the best thing, your best negotiating chip is to become invaluable, to be the first one there and the last to leave. All those old-fashioned cliches. Be the person that your manager goes to. He's the first person. He's always piling stuff on you because he knows you're going to do it. Be that guy, and then it's a lot easier to ask. It's a lot. You're in a lot better BATNA, if you will. You're in a lot better negotiating position.
I think you also have to be realistic for the organization you work. For larger organizations, there may not be as much flexibility, and the way that you get the larger increases is by taking on additional responsibility. As in, in my organization, most of the time it's pretty standard on what the increases are going to be. So if I wanted, my salary to go up, then I looked for positions that were a higher level than I was. And so I took on additional responsibility. And I think there's a lot of large companies that are going to be like that you may just not, have a lot of flexibility. There was even a question in the chat where they're saying this is the base salary. And in some large organization, that's probably going to be the case, that there may not be quite as much room for negotiation. So I know, Mike, I think you were going to add something too as well.
Oh yeah, thanks, Kelly. I was going to add that, there's really, most companies have an annual cycle where, your performance is assessed and you get rated on some kind of system, and that usually feeds into the system for merit increases. And that's kind of the normal way people get, cost of living or merit increases in their pay in a given year. But then there's the case where the employee either is, found it, whatever, a recruiter tracked them down and said, hey, I've got this great opportunity that pays, more than what you're making now. And what do you want to do about that? As Kelly said, you have to know your organization, and hopefully you have a good working relationship with your supervisor where you talk regularly about your job performance and how things are going. And as Mr. Diaz said, so you make yourself invaluable. And if you're feeling underpaid, that you can actually talk to your boss and say, can we have a negotiation? Because I'm just not feeling like I'm valued enough. And can we at least talk about it?
Awesome, thank you. So we have about 7 minutes left. We have 2 newer questions in the chat here. Should you count work experience and internship by hours or years?
I'm going to split the baby and say you can count it by months. Say I did this for 6 months or 8 months. Just count it by months.
Thank you. And do the websites that you showed earlier, Chris, do those contain entry-level wages as well, or intern-level wages?
I don't recall seeing intern-level wages. Just assume that the intern will be less than the entry level, and I don't know, maybe on the order of up to 20% less than the entry level. That's a tough question. It should definitely be above a minimum wage. You guys are engineers, or you're engineering students, and you're valuable. You really are. And the other item is if if this company as an intern, if this company, becomes a good fit, and they like you, you like them, don't be surprised if you get an offer.
Thank you. Okay, we had one more question kind of going back to when you're negotiating when you already work for the company. Caesar said it sounds like there's more room to negotiate salary with a smaller company than a large one. Is that true?
I don't know that it's necessarily true. I think that with the larger company, they may have a little bit more structure, especially if you're looking for anything to do with government. It'll have a lot more structure. I would say though, I think it probably is more driven by that than necessarily whether with small companies and in large companies. I don't know if Mike and Chris want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I was thinking it depends, because you really have, you have the small company structure, the large company structure, and then you have public service.
Yeah.
And with probably public service being the most rigid,
Mhm.
and the small company being the loosest.
Yep.
And sometimes the larger the company, the more they approach the public sector in their rigidity, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's a spectrum of It's not one.
Yeah, I'll add that there's pluses and minuses to all of the different ways you get employed, and nothing's perfect. But in the small company, you're much less likely to be constrained by rigid pay bands and job classification levels.
Mm-hmm.
And small companies typically have to do their own homework a lot to make sure they're offering competitive salaries. And I say we're closer to you in terms of having to make sure that we're making a fair negotiation.
Thank you. All right, one last question before we wrap up for the evening. This kind of goes back actually a couple sessions. How do phone interview versus an in-person interview vary? What's the purpose of using both?
Well, first of all, the phone interview is going away because we now have Teams and Zoom, so prolific. So we can now see you when we interview you, even if we're remote. So I think the phone interview should go away. And right now with the COVID going on, and we're still winding this out, I think these virtual interviews are going to continue. I don't think there's too many in-person interviews happening right now. But what we would do a lot of times with the phone interview, if it was just a matter of distance, if we were interviewing a Berkeley grad, we might not wanted to pay for a ticket to bring them down to from Berkeley to for an interview. So we would do a phone interview instead of an in-person. If it's local, we always preferred an in-person interview. Pre-COVID, we always preferred it. That's really the best. So it's to answer your question, what's the purpose? In our firm, the phone interview had more to do with distance and expenses than it did. Our preference was always in person.
Yeah, I think for our organization, the phone interview or the virtual interview was first to get the first cut, to just see, like, is there a possibility that this might be a good fit? And then the in-person would have a tendency to be, for those that we know that we're really interested in hiring, we'll bring them in person, because that way you can make sure that people are get an idea of what the work environment's about, and to make sure that they can see whether it's a good fit for them and a good fit for us.
And I'll add that we never bring anybody in for an in-person interview until they've had a virtual interview. And I that was even pre-COVID. we're going to invest a lot of time in an in-person interview, and we'd like to have peers also meet their potential coworker, and it uses time and resources, and so that we start out virtual in every case these days.
Wonderful, thank you. So that we are right on the dot, 5 o'clock. So I would like to thank our presenters today. Any last tips or comments from our presenters before we close out?
Yeah, I want to say two mantras. And I might have said this first one. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And I had a geology professor of all person. He came up with another mantra that I like living by. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're left. So be early. Just be early. Be the, don't, if work starts at 8, nothing wrong with being there at 7:45 or 7:30. Just be known for that. Just be that guy.
I think I'd add, make sure that you know your elevator pitch. Make sure that that you come prepared to be able to speak to your strengths, and make sure that you're thinking about what you want them to walk away remembering about you.